Hello, I'm Ronit Novak, and this is The Grain. Today, we're getting real about the business of photography, where it's at, what's shifting under our feet, and how people are actually making a living right now. My guests are the photo duo behind the new State of the Photo Industry Survey. Heather Morton is professor in the Honors Bachelor of Photography program at Sheridan College. She's an educator with a commercial background who's on the front lines helping new photographers navigate a fast changing industry. Rob Haggart is a former magazine photo editor and founder of aphotoeditor.com and the portfolio platform Photofolio. If you've worked in editorial or commercial photography, there's a good chance you've read Rob, learned from Rob, or run your website on Rob's software. So why this conversation and why now? Because this survey finally puts numbers to what so many photographers have been feeling. It gathers real data on who's working, where the money's coming from, how people price and license, what clients are asking for, and what strategies are actually sustaining careers, not just for the legends in New York and LA, but across markets and genres. So, this isn't an argument for or against AI. It's a grounded conversation about careers, the rates, the clauses, the expectations, and the choices photographers are facing right now. So if you're a working photographer, someone who hires them, or a student wondering what future you're walking into, this episode is for you. It's candid, it's nuanced, and it's practical. So let's get into it on The Grain. First thing I want to say, thank you for coming on. And also, I come in peace. I talk about AI. I have opinions about AI, but they are a fugue of lots of different, sometimes differing opinions about AI. So I am really pleased to have you guys on the podcast today because you put out this survey. And the survey to me is very long awaited. So it is called State of the Photo Industry Survey. This is my marked up copy.
Love that.
So
Wow.
first thing I want to ask you guys is what prompted you to do this survey? Why now?
Rob, you start. You initiated this whole thing.
Yeah, I think like 3 years ago, maybe longer, I just started asking photographers about their business, how much money they make, just asked the audience to give us what kind of information they wanted. And a really huge number of people responded, and it was super popular on Instagram. And I felt like we needed to have a more academic approach to it. And Heather reached out, and she has that approach. So we both decided to do this survey.
So what is it about like now, this moment that made you feel like this is the time?
For me, just to take a bit of a step back, what Rob had done was so useful in the classroom to get this up to the minute, more or less, snapshot, especially in terms of all the commentary that would come along with the post that Rob would do.
Yeah.
So as an educator, it was just such an amazing tool to hear from folks that are in the trenches. They've all been in the photo business a long time. Things are always changing. In my time in the industry, rates have consistently been going down.
Yeah.
Usage has been harder and harder to maintain. At least that was my theory. So again, reading these posts was so good for somebody who's at the front line of photo education. So the why now, I think it's an interesting question in terms of the survey that results that we've just launched, because that is a snapshot of 2024, which I think is just potentially such a turning point.
Yeah.
Again, it's always been fraught and things changing. Technology's changed a lot, of course, but we're here to talk about AI in part. So I think that's the why now. I think it'll become even more interesting as we roll it out, hopefully year over year.
Yeah. So your survey is a state of the industry now. So it's a litmus test on like, how are people feeling And what are people doing in the industry now? So you have a lot of demographics information here. You have years in the industry. You have like race, gender, income, fees. What are people charging? Usage. What kind of usage do they include in their fees? Business approach. So a lot of really like inside baseball, hands-on questions about how do you make a living as a photographer? And, what's the differences between the ones who are optimistic or the ones who are doing well and the ones who are making less and making money off of gig work on the side? But what you didn't really include in this survey is AI. And I
Mhm.
think that's an important point to talk about. So I want to ask you, why did you not include AI and what kind of things did you learn from talking to people about AI afterwards?
For me, it was a conscious decision not to question AI this time around. I
Okay.
think with the next survey, it's time. It's not even that it wasn't time to do it, but I honestly, part of it, I didn't want to color the survey by a lot of or too much pessimism around that. So I didn't want to seed that.
Yeah.
And so it was, I don't want to go there just yet. That's a great question, as Rob just did on his Instagram. That's a great question, I think, to deal with independently. Let's talk about AI. Let's do, and that was the idea might be that this becomes a platform for both Rob and I to ask in smaller scale questions, small scale surveys.
Yeah.
So and as a result, what's happened is in my most recent Substack post, it has been actually really interesting to go through without seeding AI at all. Where do people actually just organically want to talk about it?
Yeah. So,
I think last year, AI was not really a part of the question when we're talking about commercial and editorial photography. People were not, it's not being used commercially or editorially by photographers. It's being used around making pictures, either on the comps and in using it with retouching and things like that. But as far as making AI pictures commercially, that's just not something that's totally happening right now.
okay, that's fair. I want to go into some of the comments from Rob. You posted on your Instagram, and you have a lot of followers on your Instagram, and you got an overwhelming amount of
Yeah.
comments based on your question about how is AI impacting your industry. And that's a follow-up to the survey, which didn't really tackle AI that much. And Heather, you wrote a Substack that kind of pulled some of the AI content out of the survey because some people did mention AI, but not very many. It was what, maybe like 25% of the how many respondents? It was over 1,000.
1,067.
1,067 and about 25% unprompted did mention AI. And of those, the majority of them were in context of being pessimistic about the future of the industry, right?
Yes. So there were two questions for which folks could have open-ended answers
Yeah.
that I looked at where AI came up. It was in that question about what's your mindset on in terms of the health of the industry? And it was
Mhm.
just draw three choices there. But then please explain your response. And we had, I think, almost 1,000 people actually responding to that and giving us some qualitative data on that. And so in that, as you say, I'm just looking at it here, it's 28% of the pessimists mentioned AI. And
Yeah.
it was actually not the number one response. More popular was the idea of eroding fees generally, which I think, of course, those two things are, we could link them. But yes, so to your point, not the majority didn't mention it, but again, they weren't prompted. So I think it's significant. A significant amount certainly did talk about it. Whereas the optimists,
Hmm.
people who were optimistic, only 12% of those folks um, talked about AI. And it
Yes.
wasn't we're optimistic about AI, to be clear. It was just whether it came up or not. And then the other question was the advice. What advice do you have for photographers? And that again had some mentions of AI, not nearly as many.
Yeah. So I want to pull what some of those mentions were specifically because, yeah, you did have open ended questions about mindset and advice. And that's where the AI comments came in. So for the pessimists, for example, if you're pessimistic about the industry, you're more likely to bring up AI. So here are some of the quotes from the pessimists who brought up AI. So AI will soon be able to create any piece of jewelry I currently photograph. Prompt writers are the future creators of product photography as well as other areas. Another one is AI will take 60% of commercial photography very quickly. AI is not working for everything, but I come from agency side and I know how they think and work. So that coupled with some of the more pessimistic views, Rob, from your Instagram post, give us a pretty good sense of like why people don't want to use AI or think about it or talk about it, right? And or if they do
Yeah.
talk about it, they just hope that eventually it's going to go away. I want to pull some of the quotes, Rob, from your Instagram posts that are pretty negative. There's one.
Oh, yeah, there's
Oh,
quite a
oh yeah.
few. And I have a lot of quotes as
Oh,
well.
okay, cool. So I want to.
I can add to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay, so one that I noticed, he actually started off being optimistic, and then a response brought him down to earth. So Drew Weedman said,
Hmm.
"I'm optimistic about AI. I don't think it will end up being what all the horror stories are predicting. It will definitely pick off the micro budget stuff that was already taken over by stock. Still life is still going to get pretty beat up. It will take over what was once catalog and now e-com. That was never high-end custom creative photography anyway." And then Rebecca Pelican responded and she said, "The simplification of still life is going to get pretty beat up is pretty frustrating because there's a huge chunk of our community that shoots food, tabletop product, and still life."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, on the one hand, some photographers could say, like, "Oh yeah, it's the econ studio photographers. They're
Sure.
at a loss." But it's like, hold up, like that is
Yeah.
my income.
Yeah. How you feel about AI all depends on where you are in your career as a photographer, how long you've been doing professional photography, and then what your genre
Yeah.
is. So, yeah, if you're shooting catalog work on white, you're feeling pretty pessimistic. If, I don't know, what other genre, you're shooting portraits of people, celebrities, or something like
Hmm.
that, then you're feeling like, oh, you're safe. And then there's a lot of people who are seeing the advantages of AI as far as like retouching and working on your pictures and writing emails or making pitches. Everybody's using it in some capacity. And then, of course, hoping that it doesn't take over your industry.
Right. So that's another thing that I noticed when we look at AI in different industries, which is what the grain does. And your survey is specific to the photo industry. And some photographers obviously have a lot of love and respect for their industry only. And they don't think about how they might be using Canva or Figma or other kind of AI driven technology that takes from other industries and they don't realize the impact that it has on their own. And another kind of addendum to that is for the past 10 years or more, we've been using AI functionality in Photoshop for close cropping and content aware background expansions. And I really didn't hear a big fury over the loss of retouchers' jobs. And I think that's something we have to address now is that photographers are starting to see themselves in the crosshairs, but they have to understand that they're not living in a vacuum. Each industry is interdependent. I,
Uh,
I'm
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's everybody's hypocritical about their use. They use AI, they look at the advantages of it, and they're not thinking about whose jobs are disappearing because of that. And that's the human condition.
Is there, you think, like an understanding now of like an interdependence that creatives are all in this together now? Or do you feel like the industries are still somewhat siloed?
Yeah, I think it's really hard, especially with photographers, because they're all freelance, right? It's really hard to bring an industry together on a topic, and it always has been. They're just a bunch of lone wolves out there. And that's part of what the survey and what I've always done with my blog and on Instagram and stuff is give a platform where photographers can discuss issues. I think this is the first time I've really broached the AI subject on the Instagram, and there's a lot of great comments on there. It's both sides of the coin,
Mhm.
though, and it's hard to decipher what's really happening in the trenches. A lot of optimism, pessimism, a lot of bury your head in the sand.
Yeah.
There's a few comments in there about, I'm just going to ride this out till it's over.
But
And
who's saying
um,
that? It's the more senior photographers that are at later stages of their career, right?
yeah, no, that's true. They're probably thinking, I just need to get to the retirement age. I don't want to deal with AI. I don't want to change my practices. I don't want to incorporate AI into my photography. And I'm just going to keep making traditional pictures until I can retire or even change careers. I've actually heard from a number of photographers who are changing careers. There was somebody recently who said they were going to get into the medical field.
At the same time, my students are also, always a proportion that are head in the sand as well. Now, maybe that's not a fair comparison because they've just started on their career or on their journey into something that they love. So the idea that there may not be a future, to be fair to them, is probably quite overwhelming. So that I'm very much talking to them about exactly that. You can't, I think burying your head in the sand is the worst possible approach.
Hmm.
Getting out of the industry, we see it maybe, as Rob said, all through the different ages. It would be really great in a future study, obviously, to connect that AI mindset, for example, to age. Certainly, there were many more optimists amongst the younger survey respondents and many more pessimists among the older folks. So
Mhm. Do you think, like in your experience with students, do you feel like the copyright issue is a big concern for them or climate? What are some of the big concerns that make younger people pessimistic about AI?
it's the climate change situation. I don't know if that's what you meant by climate, but it's the water. It's
Mhm.
the water. And again, there's
Yeah, energy use. Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting because we talked about it just this past week in class, and this was right after having a guest photographer in talking about the massive production she had done, a 3-day shoot for a major Canadian retailer that was 20, 30 people, 3 days on set. So it's not that photography is about its carbon footprint either. There's something to that. I think for the students, for the young people, my sense is it's much more of an existential worry. So the writing it out isn't really at the same has the same meaning when you're 21 as it does maybe when you're 55.
Also, what's really changed is I think last year there was more optimism as far as there may be some protections put in place for the creative industries. And then we had a administration change here in the US. So I feel like there was a lot of hope that the copyright office was going to be a little more friendly to human created works. And they'd come out with a few statements basically saying that AI generated work was not, you can't copyright it. And that maybe there might be some legislation possible that would protect the creatives. And so I think that's all changed. And now it's really sort of an inevitability with where AI is going, that the train has left the station. We can't turn back time on this, and we need to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing tech companies siding with the US government right now, and it seems like they're going to get their way in terms of data and not paying copyright. One of your respondents on your Instagram, her name is Chelsea Louise Kyle, she said, protecting how clients can use the works while maintaining copyright and adhering to usage negotiations needs to be even more clear from all parties. We need to be screaming this from the rooftops because the risk photographers face not fully understanding these things is scary and could have negative implications for everyone up the chain. And we're making lasting impact now by ignoring the problem. And I wonder, in what ways do you think that photographers could come together to try to rectify this?
I think the only way is through some sort of legislation so that we fight AI and that laws are put in place that protect all creative classes. And what's gone on with AI, like scraping the entire internet and stealing all this copyrighted material to build their models, it's
Mhm.
crazy. That's illegal. That should not happen. I've got on my blog, I've got 16, 17 years worth of material that I put on the internet, and it's all been scraped up. And if somebody has a question about photography, an AI bot will just give them an answer. They won't even visit my website.
Have you felt your traffic dropping in the past year?
Oh, yeah. So I own a web
Mhm.
company, Photofolio, and we build websites for photographers. And the bot traffic has increased our cost of
Hmm.
hosting. So we get thousands of dollars more in hosting costs because the bots come along and scrape all the
Oh, that's
websites.
interesting. So
And
you pay for that
yeah,
traffic
that's
that comes to you and scrapes your data?
exactly, exactly. And everyone is having this problem, especially like a Wikipedia, where it's a nonprofit. So
I
their hosting costs have gone up exponentially because of all the scraping that's going on. So yeah, we see these scraping bots weekly, and there's got to be hundreds of them because every country now is trying to build these models. It's like an arms race with the AI. So there's all these bots running around scraping websites, and it's just driving up the cost of hosting a
And you're
website.
saying it's not a negligible amount? Is it like tiers? Oh, now you have a website that experiences this much traffic, so you're going to have to pay this much next year. Or is it like a kind of
Yeah.
variable thing?
For us, it's gone up by 20%. So it's pretty significant. And we host thousands of websites. But I know there's a couple of sites that the bots love to scrape that have like tons of information on them. And their hosting costs have gone through the
Is
roof.
there legislation or any activism to try to get money back for that?
And that's a great question. I mean, I know, there's lawsuits. New York Times and I think Getty have
Yeah, but it's
sued
always
OpenAI.
about copyright. It's not about just the monetary hit of all of these bots scraping their sites. Like I actually had never heard of that before just now.
Oh, yeah. So actually, there's a great interview with this guy from Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a hosting service, I guess you would call it. And he's basically talking about how back in the old days, Google would scrape a site and they'd scrape a couple pages. And in exchange for them scraping your site, they would send you a visitor. And that was the exchange.
Yeah.
That's how the web works,
Right.
right? So you put stuff on the internet and Google sends you a visitor and hopefully they buy a product or they see an ad or something like that. With the AI bots and just AI in general, they'll scrape 6,000 pages and send you one
Mm.
visitor. So it's gone from 2 pages and 1 visitor to 6,000 pages and 1 visitor. This is what the guy from Cloudflare is saying. And so it's pretty much going to be 0 soon. So you'll ask AI question about, so I have a photography blog. They'll ask it a photography question. Instead of sending the person to my blog, they'll just take all the information they scraped off my blog. And I'll give them the answer right
Yeah.
there. And they'll never leave the
Well, I'm
page.
certainly aware of that in terms of news and going to media sites that their traffic is dropping because of Google, but it's an interesting take to talk about it in reference to photographers because for the most part, they don't have blogs, they have like visual galleries on their websites, right? And so if AI bots are scraping that data, nobody is looking for information and is going to go back to the source like how you might if you were on ChatGPT and you wanted to go back to the New York Times article it pulled from, but you're just generating an image and nobody's trying, there's no link, there's no option even to go back to the source of where those like elements of that AI generated image came from. So that's a huge
Right,
drawback
exactly.
for photographers that actually I was today years old when I learned of this. So thank you.
Yeah, they've scraped all the images and they've basically ingested them and now they're producing images. It's all copyrighted material. They've stolen it and it is illegal what they've done, but it's such a massive thing that they've done. It seems like a problem that can't be solved. There's lawsuits but it would come down to legislation, honestly, to make some laws that protect photographers or that make it so they have to pay out. But even like the payout thing, it's going to be pennies on the dollar. It's like when music went to streaming. And then artists, they get, I don't even know the numbers, like 1 million streams and they get $1 or something like that. It just becomes pennies on the dollar for photographers. And it's crazy what they've done. And with photography has always, since the beginning, has always gotten easier, right? The original photographers, you had to be a chemist if you wanted to make a picture. That was, daguerreotypes,
Right.
if I'm saying that correctly. You had to be a chemist to make a picture. And now we've gotten to the point where there's no camera.
Yeah.
And it's just every picture that's ever been taken is ingested into the system. And you just tell it what you want it to make a picture of, and out it comes. And is that a great development? I think it's terrible. Make cameras easier to operate, that's fine. But let's still make pictures with cameras. Let's not make them without a camera. And it's just, I guess it's just the fact that it's just using everybody else's pictures to make the final product. It's crazy.
Heather, one of the comments in your advice from Optimists, I believe this is, my genre still needs real photographers. AI is here to stay, and it's opening new opportunities for the brave, bold individuals taking the lead. It's the Wild West. Opportunities like these come only every few decades. So those are two kind of different point of views. One is let's explore something new. It's the Wild West. But then the first portion is my genre still needs real photographers. So do you think that there is a kind of a holding on or recognizing of what is simply photographic within this medium that cannot be replaced by AI?
Yeah, I think some patterns are emerging in terms of, again, my perspective needs to be, I had a student last week going, I'm so sick of talking about AI. Why do we always have to talk about AI? And I said, it's my job to set you up to be able to have success in this industry that's just changing so fast and so in such a major way. But I think there are some clues about what we'll still need. I think there's actually a little bit of a silver lining. I've heard young photographers, so recent grads, talk about, I'm just as this is in a retouching context, because these are this is an entry level job in some respects, is doing those initial retouching work. And sometimes our grads go on to become photographers. Sometimes they stay in the retouching world. Those are those entry level jobs that are now just, you push a button. And it was interesting. They're like, nope, I'd be happy if I never have to clone another leaf. Like,
Right.
I'm done with that work. So that low level, e-com, maybe, let's say, or prescriptive work. I'm trying to put a positive spin on this. So, that the creativity isn't there. It's the technician that we really need at that level. So that idea of cameras becoming easier to use, to Rob's point, the barriers to entry having collapsed completely. So the good news story out of that, and I'm a little bit agnostic about the ramifications around that, again, especially around those entry-level jobs for sure. But the idea that perhaps the through line to success is an extreme subjective viewpoint on your craft. So a really interesting and new and fresh take on image making, probably aligning it not just with a still image, but of course with motion, with sound, pushing your own creative subjectivity. I think there's a lot of room there, and it is opening up. And we did see some of those responses to Rob's post and to mine as well. There's a few in there around that idea that I can now be a sound designer and write great copy. It's an aid for me. So there's that. I
So
think the human, of course, still taking pictures when we need pictures of a real human at a real time. I think that the advertising agencies are all about time and money. Like, it's got to be fast, speed to market, and cheap. That's what they want. And AI is fantastic for that. There's no question. I felt the same way when I saw it coming. Like, somebody mentioned, isn't this NFTs again? And they didn't end up being anything. AR, they didn't end up being anything. As soon as I heard about what generative AI could do from my background in agency, it was like, oh, this is seismic because of the speed, if nothing else, and the money. But perhaps that means there's some budget left there to actually really lean into human storytelling and narrative. I think the narrative is not going to be we can already see that AI is evening out. The slop is the slop. Like just by definition, it's only drawing from what's already out there. So I think there might be some silver linings or some ways to go with it for photographers.
But then in a way, it means that photographers have to have like kind of a creative reckoning and see themselves as also motion designers or, audio engineers and composers. And maybe that's asking too much. Or do you think that opens doors to
I
be something else?
Well, I guess I'm excited about it as opening doors to something else. I think and maybe to draw from my experience as a prof, like working with young people, you see that creative drive. They just want to tell stories and create. Now they want to tell it with stills and motion. We do motion as well. And my background is stills, so I'm still having to remind myself how crucial motion is. And they are different, though. They are different ways of telling the story. But I see them perk up when they are introduced to new tools. Let's think about just audio and motion. Let's forget about AI right now. They do perk up and they're interested in that. So I think the center of the education is around image-based storytelling, whether it's for brands, whether it's for retail, whether it's somebody's wedding. That work isn't going to go away right away. It might change a little bit. There's other things we can do or people will be able to do with AI. But I do believe there'll be a bit of a swing into the human.
Right. So going back to what I said about siloed industries,
Yeah.
and if you're a photographer, you're definitely not a music composer. But now with AI, those are blending in ways that they never did before. Do you think that maybe there won't be as much of a difference and a separation between different media? Maybe even university faculties will merge different disciplines together into one?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it, especially from a commercial standpoint. Like if you are, and again, we saw some of those comments just in Rob's post, that idea of being a one-stop shop, like an in-house agency, the in-house being myself, like my own brain, with help. And this isn't talking about not working with AI. This is where you're harnessing AI. So I come to you and you have strategy chops. You have like high level of design chops. We don't do
Yeah, you still have to have those talents.
Yes.
You still have to have talents and all of it. So
taste.
it's more of what you're saying, Heather.
Yeah.
It's like you're a hybrid. It brings a different type of person with different skills into the industry. We saw this with photography for so many years. Photography was about operating cameras. Cameras were difficult to operate.
Expensive.
And yeah, and just the whole process, like with film, like turning the film into something digital that can be delivered to clients. And this was all like very high technical skills until very recently. And being a photographer, mate, you're very technically driven. You wanted to operate a machine, and that's all changed. It's brought different people in the industry, which is fine, which is great. But it's also not good if you had set your career path on operating
I
cameras.
do
Can I
hear,
just-
yeah.
Can I add one thing to that? Because I published an article in 2017, and I know what it was about, but I did open it up again this morning just to relook at it. Because the argument that I was making in 2017 was that technical prowess, even in 2017, wasn't as important as a photography educator as narrative and subjectivity and authenticity. And that word, I'm not a big fan of that word right now because I think everybody uses it for everything. But that subjectivity and narrative ability, when I wrote that article in 2017, what we were contending with was user-generated content. Everybody wanted to be online. Instagram was still fresh and new. So you would take a picture of your Starbucks coffee and hashtag Starbucks. So that was already it was the rise of the influencer, really. So I think it's important to remember that the idea of being just a technician, like I totally agree with Rob, that is absolutely where it came from. And that has been eroding. Like if that's your only professional thing that you're offering, that's not enough.
Right. I have heard from photographers saying that I am a really good fashion photographer. My photos are crispy, my photos are glamorous, they have this beautiful polish, but I'm not an ideas person. I am just a tradesperson and sort of akin to a tabletop still life fruit photographer from the 80s who would shoot like an 8x10 plate on with a bellows camera and get like a beautiful shot. But now you don't have to do any of that work to get a gorgeous shot of a plate of fruit on a table, right? You can get the focus. You can even get the perspective done in post, right? Using AI. So, like, yeah, that entire kind of craft of learning how to make an image is kind of moot now.
Yeah.
And I'll go one step further with that, in that saying that people don't care
Mm.
about that image anymore either. It's just like this. Somebody mentioned in the comments, it's just like this burnout of too much photography and even too many words, and how is AI, what's going to happen? It's just going to flood us
Yeah.
with, I'm going to get emails written by AI and I'm going to have my AI read the email and send you an email back
That's a really,
because I don't want to
yeah,
read it.
that's a really interesting point. Like, you two coming in as photography experts share that same media awareness as film experts and music experts and copy experts, where you know that there's a deluge of content now. We're swamped. We can't take it all in. We have to
Yeah.
neutralize that diet of what we consume online. And the good stuff is either not getting seen or just not getting made anymore because, like, why bother? And I wonder,
Yeah. I'm basically saying consumers don't care.
Yeah.
I love
That.
fantastic photography. Every time I see a great portrait, I just want to stare at it and study it. And do other people do that? Consumers, there's so much photography. What they think is great, I don't know that it matters what they think is great, but it used to be curated. It's not anymore.
And I don't know if this is where Rob's going, but I think there's still room for beautiful storytelling, interesting, effective, slow photography. Analog is always on the fringes where people are film curious. I have students who are shooting on VHS. Like,
Mhm.
that's their motion that they're doing. So I think that in a commercial context, and that's the user generated content piece. Again, in 2017, it didn't matter what the photography, and that was the point of the article. It was that it was right in my phone, or I could participate in its creation. I think we've moved beyond that, but now I think that's an important point that Rob makes, that how does it matter how absolutely beautiful? In some cases, yes. So, which might mean, again, it goes back to maybe that lower level work may be on the way out, but I think there will always be room for beautiful storytelling, and that'll be the right way to do it in a real photography, whether or not it's analog or digital, but just real people in front of real things or people.
Yeah. The industry's shrinking. It has been shrinking for a long time, the pure high-end photography industry. And that's what Heather and I are interested in, the high-end commercial and editorial photography. And it's going to continue to shrink. There's going to be a smaller audience. There's going to be a select number of brands who need high-end storytelling and pictures and motion to reach their audience. And those people are still going to need to be around to deliver that.
if you could wave a magic wand and make AI disappear, would you do it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Like, it's a terrible thing. I'm very like
Yeah.
solutions focused, but it's a terrible thing. Rob, go.
I mean, yeah, it's like, who's benefiting? Who's going to benefit in the end from AI? There's going to be a couple of companies. It's going to concentrate all the wealth among a few people. It's the same, it's software. Facebook, the wealthiest people, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, that it's going to concentrate all the wealth among a few people. And they're taking all the information from us. They're taking all our blog posts and our photography and ingesting it and then creating these tools that we have to pay to use.
All three of us have said that the industry has been contracting for a couple decades before AI even entered the picture. In what way was the industry ripe for this kind of an AI co-option?
Well, and can I actually just jump in? Like it's contracting, I think, in certain ways. I think we have more, we've said this, but another way to think about what we just said, we have more images out there in the
Yeah,
world than we've ever had. And again,
that's a good point.
when I look at my students, they are finding their way. So it's contracting. Again, somebody posted about gone are the days when you'd spend 3 months shooting products and and then you could sit on the beach the rest of the year.
I
Like,
love that comment.
I don't know that we need to go back to that. And
Come on, that was so much
I
fun.
never had
We had
that.
so much
That was
fun.
never my experience. I came in
yeah,
too late for that.
I think that
Uh,
like to
yeah,
take
God.
not to walk back my comments on AI. I think AI is problematic in so many more frightening ways than just what it's doing to the photography world. The industry probably needs a disruption. I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. So you can cut that if you care to.
I mean, yeah, so it's like the contraction, and that the only thing I'm interested in is the business of photography, making a living at it, making pictures. That's just not what I'm about. Like, yeah, there's like tons of amazing photography out there and people who are making it, and I'm only interested in photography as a business. And so that's what's shrinking. The ability to make a career as a photographer, purely making pictures, that's what's shrinking, and that's what I'm sad about.
And maybe the survey is in part, I don't know if I 100% agree with Rob. So maybe why we're doing
Yeah.
this survey is we're going to figure that piece out because I think there are new avenues of image making that are that are not traditional. They're new and that can afford people a sustainable industry or a living, especially if it wasn't around. Like those
Right.
more in-house roles, wedding photography, retail photography has just expanded since I was working in commercial practice. You would never say that you were a wedding photographer. You wouldn't be one. Now people are having to do so that's again where just to get back to the survey, that's where it's kind of interesting to see how people are able to stay in photography. The AI piece is going to be really disruptive. And I think what's going to happen quickly is it's going to sort itself out. We're going to see where AI is working. And if our hunches are correct about what genres of the industry are going to go away, and as Rob said earlier, it's going to be genre specific. So again, the survey might be really interesting around querying whether it's just pessimism around AI in mapping that to genre or to types of photography.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point in that the goal of the survey is to help photographers, for them to understand, oh, I have this genre and this client size, and here's what people are charging. So I could be charging that as well. And here's what people are doing for marketing and and just like helping them with their career. And so if we discover, as Heather's saying, that there's some hybrid places where people are having a great career as a photographer, we want to tell people about that. And we also, to the point of AI, everybody believes the train has left the station and there's no going back. And so we're going to start asking questions about AI and how people are incorporated and how they deal with clients with AI. I've actually already covered contracts. We put out something a while back on wording.
Wording AI
Yeah.
clauses into contracts?
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody just asked me a question. My clients are asking to take my photography and put it into a AI machine and make variations, change I don't know, the color of the dress or something like that. And so they're like, what's the wording everybody's using? And we posted that. And I actually went to the agents and asked them what they're using. They gave me their wording and I posted that. So yeah, we're just trying to help everyone out, help everybody understand what's going on with the industry and give people the tools they need to deal with whatever's coming.
Yeah, because we can't wave a magic wand and make it go away as much as you guys say it would be a good idea if that could happen. But yeah, curing
Ex-
that ostrich head in the sand issue is probably the first step.
The other thing I would add, just around if we could wave a magic wand, I stick with my answer. However, the other thing to acknowledge is the barriers to entry of photography when I entered the industry whether it's just from a cost, but also just what spaces as an image creator are open to what types of bodies. We've had students who will not be able to assist as one might traditionally do as a next step after school. Physically, they just cannot.
Right.
That's there. We had a student in a wheelchair, for example. Now, the idea that you can be an image creator, you could have been an image creator, of course, without working in photography. But I think it's important to acknowledge that there are some, and my students are also aware of this, the ones who are like grappling with, maybe there's some good aspects, or maybe there's some things to, I don't know about celebrate, but to acknowledge that and I know you've talked about that on your podcast, Renee, before,
Yeah.
about the barriers to entry, not just from a money standpoint, but just in who participates and what kind of, because you can do so much on your own now, that allows a certain type of participation that perhaps was really difficult in the past.
And it counters the argument that photography used to be a craft and the cameras were expensive and you had to know how to use them and you had to almost be a chemist in the older days as well. And what about people who wanted to be a part of that world but just couldn't afford to do it or just did not get the
Yeah.
privilege of that? They're in image making. Tell us about it, Rob. I want to hear your thoughts.
Can't we come up with a better way to help those people than just, crashing the entire industry with getting rid of cameras? So we could, I could think of ways that we could assist people who wanted to get involved in photography, offer them scholarships, free learning, create ways for somebody in a wheelchair to assist
Yeah.
on photo shoots. We could solve this.
Fair.
I mean,
I just don't think AI just seems like the extreme solution.
you're
to
right.
me.
We could solve it, but historically, we haven't. Like, historically,
I mean,
not
it's a good point.
everybody shot 3 days of stills and then was able to go on a beach. Like, I can say as a woman, it was a difficult industry to break into if you wanted to lug gear and be an assistant or be respected. It was challenging
Yeah.
and less now, I'm sure, than it was, say, 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And you
No, you make a good
say that
point.
we could have opened up those gates a bit, and idealistically, sure, but historically, that hasn't been the truth. I will say a lot of the comments and a lot of the followers that I have on TikTok and Instagram are from people who have historically been gatekept from the industry and are now seeing AI as a kind of like reparation style, like revolutionary force for their culture and their race. And that to me says something just about the industry itself and the culture of the industry, more so than just the technology.
Yeah. The BIPOC photo mentorship program, which I've been involved with for a few years, certainly saw that something does need to be done. It doesn't necessarily need to be AI, to Rob's point, but it may and I think likewise we will see more uptake of these new platforms or these new ways of creating from younger folks, especially given even the economy is so different now than it was when we were coming up. The ability to
What,
live in a city, for example.
but what it means is that the imagery will change. And the kind of reverent imagery that Rob is talking about that we admire so much that have happened in the past, like 80, 50 years of photography are really going to go by the wayside. When that equipment just isn't available anymore, the film isn't available anymore, and people are just not bothering to do it. Save for a few people in your class, Heather, that are picking up film cameras and stuff. But the imagery has to change. So in a lot of ways, our psyche has changed and our tastes essentially will have to adapt to this new thing. But what of the older stuff? How can we retain it, learn from it, at least to have it there so that new people who are entering the industry in an AI world can at least draw from that as inspiration so that they don't make slop?
Yeah, I also teach, I'm the business industry person in our school, but I also teach a suite of histories and theory classes. And I think the smart money is that and Rob alluded to this earlier, the design chops, understanding references, color theory, all of that, even light, the way light works, that's
Yeah.
still going to be crucial. And the storytelling, I will talk about that again, but taste, what's making something compelling visually. I think that's still important. So I don't know. I don't know that stuff is gone per se. I think we'll come back around. I think it's interesting to think about the imagery will change, but I think it goes back to what we were talking about, the onslaught of images, especially if they're all the same because it's drawing from what's existed in the past. That might mean there's room for a jump. I wonder about a jump into something more visually and conceptually interesting that is appropriate even in a commercial context, not just around a fine art, but to get it just to get attention. It's all about attention. So if all the imagery looks the same,
I'd be happy if we brought new voices into the industry and new perspectives, and we weren't always subjected to the white man's gaze as far as the history of photography goes. My biggest concern is, where's the money going to come from? How are people going to make a living? How are people going to get paid for making these
Right.
pictures? If AI is the solution, I don't think they will, because anybody can do it. Any picture that you make with AI, I can make the exact same picture. I can take the picture and feed it back into the AI machine. I can get all the prompts that you used, and I can make my own version. So I don't know if that's really a great solution, but here we are.
I'm
So
saying
we figure out how to navigate this new world we're living
throughout
in.
and one question I have about that about that sustainability piece, we've started to hear people saying the job that would have the okay, so the job that the client wants a job that's going to cost $100,000. They don't have that. They don't have anything near that. I can make that all of those assets, that laundry list of assets. I can make that for whatever their budget is, let's say 30. And I can do it
Yeah.
in 2 days instead of 10. So my question is that photographer or image creator or whatever you want to call them still maintaining whatever that creative fee would have been on that, quoting it clean. Like you want this many assets, this is what it's going to cost you for usage and my day rate and my retouching, all of that money that would come to me over that 10-day job. If all of the production elements are stripped away, and we haven't talked about that, but all of our creative partners, they are going to suffer along with the photographers. But if that creative fee can be maintained or even grown, then there is maybe a sustainability. I'm being hopeful here, but I haven't heard the answer to that. Are you
yeah.
charging the same or more to do all of this production because overall it's going to be cheaper because you're not paying for a location, you're not paying for a okay.
Yeah, I've been on set and talking to like prop stylists who are just groaning. They're like, I'm done. Like, I've got another year or two, and they're going to figure out how to change the napkin on the table with a click instead of me showing up with my box, my bin of napkin options and stuff like that that I've been collecting. And so those creative partners that we collaborate with, yeah, are definitely going to go. And yeah, the prices of a production are going to go down significantly. What other industry is going to take that fee, or in whose pocket is that going to go? I mean, Rob, you're the business perspective here. Where do you see that changing?
A lot of the discussion around how much you make, which is the series that I started on Instagram, has been about photographers not understanding how much you can make in the business, and that you can retire and you can raise a family and go on vacation. And some of the newer photographers not knowing that, and there's always been this erosion of fees. I would love to see it not erode with AI, but I'm very
Do you,
doubtful that's not going to
so
be the
you don't
case.
do you think it's too late, or do you think that AI is a way for photographers to dig their heels in and get that real career going
I
again?
think that the clients will always they'll have the
Yeah.
leverage with the AI. It's just going to be too easy for them to take over, to take their ideas and just feed them into the
Yeah.
machine, I think. I don't know. My optimism on the whole thing is, I think the timeline is wrong. I think everybody's wrong about how fast it's going to happen. I think we've hit peak AI, and the trying to get to the next level is going to be so iterative. It's going to be small little jumps. I always think about the self-driving cars that we were promised 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I can't remember now. They're not here. All we got is I have a better cruise control.
That's interesting.
That's what I got. I got a thing that beeps at me when I go over the line. I know there's better stuff out there, but we're not even close to self-driving cars. We were told, I think it was 5 years ago, I read something recently that you could drive across the country in a Tesla. 5 years ago, they said we'd be doing that now. It's not even possible. I think they tried it, and 30 minutes in, they had to take over because the car was going to
So you
crash.
think we're giving
So,
AI just way too much credit right now? It's not anywhere near what we're afraid of.
yeah, no, the timeline's going to be way longer than we think. It's just going to be a huge mess. Obviously, all those jobs we're talking about, prop stylists, retouching, and things that are going to go away faster. When the self-driving discussion first happened, I remember it was just like, there's so many people that drive for a living. Let's look at these numbers. It's going to decimate the economy. There's all the taxi drivers, all the people driving trucks. Yeah, they came out with an electric truck that could only carry potato chips. Because, you can't get any miles. You can't carry anything but potato
Right.
chips. It's just not gone the way that anyone
Mm-hmm.
predicted. If you really want to dig into this Sam Altman, who's in charge of OpenAI, you will find some outrageous claims in his history. His entire history of being in the tech industry has been him making the most crazy, outrageous claims, what Elon Musk has done with self-driving. So, and none of it's
So
come
this
true.
is what's really interesting. So there's this duality in this conversation I'm having with you two. Rob, you're business minded. You're thinking about it's not going to be as disruptive to the business as quickly as people think because it's just the technology isn't good enough yet. Don't worry, just keep doing what you're doing. But Heather, you're saying that there is a storytelling and a taste-making opportunity here and an equity opportunity, business aside, but there are creative opportunities with AI that I think you're saying are worth exploring?
I think it's going to take swaths of the industry a little sooner than Rob thinks. So I differ a little bit there. And of course, I'm educating students who realistically won't be in the industry practicing as photographers for a few years. So it's that future casting that is so hard to do. But even just anecdotally talking to some recent grads here in Toronto who are having great success with certain types of photography and hearing from their clients that, yeah, all of that work is now generated by AI. We don't hire for this anymore.
They're hearing that from agencies
Yeah.
already.
Yes, they are. To be clear, I think it's from direct to client work. And we see it in signage all the time. Maybe it would have been stock, it's replacing stock, but even low level, I have my students do an assignment where they look around their just the blocks of their house and what businesses, really small businesses, could use your services. And I think if you want to show your plate of food, you need a photographer. If you just need to show that I sell a burger, you're not bringing in a photographer for that. So I would say being aware of what is more easy to generate means we need to lean into the creative possibilities. Absolutely. Your own subjectivity. So we go through this debate all the time. And I know even Rob and I have talked about it, and it's been talked about is, do you niche or do you generalize? And I think having a particular style perspective might be a really it's just working in creating new visual aesthetic choices that we haven't seen before could be the thing that the brand needs. I'm launching a new brand and I want a new vibe, a new energy. So it goes back to our discussion about technician. I don't just need my clothes photographed. I want to create a vibe and an atmosphere. Now you can do that with AI, but but even the person who's going to create that needs to be able to draw that out. And it goes right back to those skills we were talking about around color theory, design, etc., taste. So honing your tastes, ability to know what's good and what works. I don't know that it's opening up a lot of great possibilities, even around the accessibility. I'm glad that we talked about that, but I don't want to overstate that as my opinion. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that answered what you were getting at, but
I mean,
just to clarify my position.
yeah,
perhaps.
I'm thinking back to graduating from school and those entry level jobs like assisting or retouching, those are the first to be eliminated with AI. So those students just don't have those initial kind of like lower rung on the ladder steps in order to make their way up to the top. From what it sounds like to you, they have to start as creative directors. They have to start at the top
Well,
if
we're
they're going to get
already, yeah.
noticed.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I think we're already seeing that junior photographers or just photographers in general, and we could look at it as of course, as a challenge or an opportunity, but the opportunity there is to, yes, understand strategy, understand creative direction, and certainly I think that's another piece of it, that I can understand what you want these images to do. And to me, that sounds more like we've joked in the past about now the decks all have AI generated images on them, but it used to be the stock image. And photographers were basically turning low res to high res. That's what you were doing. You were shooting exactly to the brief. Now, if that allows you to put your kids through university, then that's awesome. But if you want to have a creative impact, maybe there's something to be said out of where photography, commercial photography will need to go. To cut through the crap, you're going to need to have a really interesting look and feel for your brand. Not every brand, not every company is going to be interested in that. And maybe 90% of the images that they put out there, slop, just generic is fine. But there will be those opportunities. And I don't think the assisting opportunities will go. I think some photographers will go. We will still need assistance if we are shooting real people and real things.
Yeah, I always forget about the students. You work with the students. I'm more focused on the commercial, the career photographers, the people who are working in LA and New York and that kind of thing. And it's funny, I actually spoke to a class of students and I asked people how excited they were to start their own business, and nobody raised their hand. And then the professor was like, no, they all want to work in a company. They want to take pictures for social media. They want to be the Instagram photographer at some company. And this was a photography class in Pittsburgh. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I don't understand. I don't know what's going on and what kind of careers people want at the very
I think a
beginning.
lot of people just want a steady job, a steady paycheck that's somewhat creative, but they don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur, creative director who's constantly pivoting with the technology and the styles. That's some people.
Yeah, that sounds
That's
exhausting.
appealing to some people, but to others, it's impossible.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand that. I think that I always, for me, I always try to speak at a very high level in the photography business because there's no one doing that. There's lots of, there's plenty of photography blogs and Instagram accounts, and nobody's really just trying to speak to the career photographers or the people who've been in the business for a long time. So that's just where my focus is. But I understand the photography business is so much bigger, and there's so many opportunities that I don't have knowledge of.
A lot of us don't have knowledge. So I think that's why it's so important that you guys put together this survey and just did a test and asked everybody, what do they think now? Whether you asked about AI or not, that's my job, is to follow up and pull you guys into the ring and start getting your opinions on it. Whether you're reluctant to have an opinion or not, I'm the most reluctant to have an opinion. But the fact that you're just grouping everybody together and asking the questions means that we care about this industry. This matters. These are people, and it's not just artists. These are careers. This is income into an economy of, well, you went all over the world asking people questions. And I think that being able to compare different approaches to photography through all those different genders and ages and countries is really a huge service that you guys have done that's never been done before. We haven't seen this anywhere.
Yeah, there have been different surveys, but what makes ours unique, and it goes back to what Rob was just talking about, was it's really focused on the commercial freelancer,
Yeah.
which is that maybe that legacy makes it sound like it's not going to be around, and I don't believe that, but it's that traditional commercial higher end. We make kind of an interesting team because I need to worry about the folks coming into the industry, and Rob has such institutional knowledge of the career photographer. So the idea might be that being able to see how the young people or mid-career, smaller market, how they're making a sustainable living may help even the career photographers that are seeing like some massive changes. The people who've been in the industry for 25 years have seen a lot of changes. So
Yeah. But nothing
let
as existential as this one.
maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think not. Yeah, the comments, the doomerism that I get on Instagram and in my email box, it's crazy. So there's some people are really upset and fearful of what's going to happen to the industry. And yeah, it's hard if
Mm.
you made a career. Anybody people who make career logging, and suddenly there's regulations that say you can't log anymore. And what are you going to do? What's a lot of photographers I talk to, they're like, this is the only thing I could do, especially people who are freelancing. They're like, I can't have a boss. I need to be taking pictures. What am I going to do? It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's a compulsion to take a stand to say, oh, I hate AI or I love AI or what's your stance on AI? And you see people online who are really on either sides of the divide. And what I'm trying to do is just bring it all together and just think about the nuance and like the gray areas, and there's good and there's bad, and there is a lot of bad, and that needs to be talked about. When you talk about AI, you have to talk about the problems with it. There's so many hype artists talking about how great it is, and that frankly it's not helpful because it only makes the negative voices, the voices that are against it, feel more pushed away, and then they get more negative about it. Whereas what I feel the right thing to do is to bring them both together so that we can find that there is actually maybe some common ground. There is some good, there is some bad. How can we deal with the copyright issues, we didn't talk about bias issues, and there's ethical issues, there's climate issues, like there's so
Many,
much.
so many. Oh yeah, it's just endless, like how to power it and where's the money going and what they're doing. And yeah, just the biases. And I guess I'm the old man in the room. I've been in the industry over 30 years. So I've seen a lot of changes, and I'm really not a fan of AI photography. I don't really want to consume it. I'm not interested in it. I'm not trying to take a stand and look down on people who are producing it. That's not something I'm interested in consuming at this point. And I'm happy for the tools, people saying they're going to save hundreds of hours a year in retouching because of AI. And of course, everybody's using it for emails and letters and not letters, sending letters,
Emails and
posts. Yeah. And that's all fine. I'm just not. I had a friend that told me they wrote an article using AI and they wanted me to read it. I'm like, I didn't want to read it. But if you didn't write it,
Mhm.
I don't want to spend the time reading it. I don't know. It's just not.
But
I feel like the old man yelling at the
there is
cloud.
a way to do it well. Yes, I see all sorts of horrible articles on Substack, on LinkedIn that are written by AI, and I think like this should be
Yeah.
illegal. I'm now like putting comments like, I would have read this article, but it's clearly written by AI, so go away. Like I am now that curmudgeon, and I have a podcast about
Right.
AI. But there actually are ways of using it collaboratively so that you actually can produce better results. Now, listen, don't take my word for it. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. But there's a lot of younger people in the industry who don't have the option to just say, never mind, I'm going to keep doing what I'm
Mhm.
doing for another 10 years or so. I don't. I'm in between young and old, and I don't have that option. That's why I started this. I
Right.
need to embrace the grain. Now I'm copping out by not being a hype artist and selling courses. I'm like talking about the nuance of it for good or bad. Maybe I'll get sponsorships from AI companies and maybe I won't because of the way that I kind of like am in the middle. And that's the best that I can do because I'm in the middle of young and old. But people who are young, really, I feel that they can't do that. Like Heather, I'm sure you can attest. Like they can't. They actually have to embrace it whether they want to or not because it's the future.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. They have to have a perspective. And probably nothing will sit particularly well, especially right now, because these guys got into photography before AI and they're coming into an industry that is really shifting. So they might have to put aside some real existential issues that they have. It's just like with anything, though. And again, it goes back to hopefully the usefulness of our survey. You need to have as much information about what's going on in the industry, in the environment in which you're, in the case of my students, about to enter. Is there a future in this? Or can I change the future of what that might be? And if I cannot stomach the environmental costs or the ethical costs, absolutely fair. Like that's a fair choice. Like I had to talk to my students about it is my job as an educator to prepare you for the industry as best as I can, but also to create strong citizens. And so this talk around the ethical implications, the environmental implications is really important. And so I thought after, should we do a letter writing campaign? Like it's going back to maybe public school, but maybe we don't just have to like the horse is out of the barn, like it absolutely is. But also, maybe that's not a great thing to be modeling. Like I'm aware of that. That's not a great thing to be modeling for the youth.
I do feel the heavy
Yeah.
burden of you teaching a course and not knowing what the future is and trying to create, good artists, established career professionals, and also good citizens.
There was a report by Bain and Company. They said that the AI infrastructure will require $2 trillion in AI revenue by 2030. So that's more revenue than Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta, NVIDIA, and more than 5 times the size of the entire global subscription software market.
So
So
is the implication there that it can't sustain itself? Nobody's making money on it. So
there's no way that
Yeah.
could ever happen. And
so that's
so
interesting.
the way they're building out AI currently is unsustainable. There's no chance that money will materialize. The other article, and I've used this years ago in talks, is that countries with strong intellectual property protections have strong economies. I think this is a bit old, but it says that 51% of Canada's economy is represented by knowledge-based industries. So protecting intellectual property is critical to the economy. And, what this AI is doing is getting rid of intellectual property, or it's condensing it. It's taking all the intellectual property and putting it in the hands of a couple of companies.
Also asking the question, what is intellectual property and is it actually a human right? Is it something that you've just enjoyed, but it doesn't necessarily act as a given?
It's what makes the economy strong,
Mhm.
though. Countries that have no protections don't have as strong economy as countries that do. And this includes like patents
Right.
and trademarks and things like that. They give businesses the ability to create something and to enjoy protections. I can make images, those are copyrighted. You can't steal them, you can't copy them, or at least you can't copy my idea or the execution of my idea. I forget how that works. Anyway, having those protections in place allow you to operate a business.
Yeah.
They give you a monopoly. The whole point is it's a limited monopoly. You create something and then you're allowed to be the only person who can sell that.
It's certainly something that's casts a light on copyright and the question of copyright. I've had on my podcast creators who are saying that they don't want copyright of their work anymore. They want to just make it and let it be part of the collective unconscious that AI consumes and create something new out of it. And they don't feel that they should retain ownership to the work that they produce. Now, I don't know. I haven't taken a test. I haven't taken a survey to see exactly how many creatives feel that way versus ones that don't. The fact that there are some surprised me, but then the more I talk to people,
Yeah.
there are more people who feel that way. And I don't know if they're just submitting to something that they already see is happening, or if this is just a way that people have always felt. But it's just worth noting that the copyright thing, it's not set in stone for some people.
Yeah, no, I experience this a lot with Web 2.0, I would call it, the Creative Commons people. But the reality, I felt like they just wanted to use other people's work. They're producing things that they put
Right, it's
out
more
and they
self-serving.
want people to freely use because they also want to take somebody's work and use it. And there was some pretty landmark lawsuits, I think, in that era. I can't recall them, but some photographers and musicians who had a problem with the remixing of their work. And I think that's what a lot of these people want to do. They want to create things by remixing existing work. And original authors had a problem with that. And they thought that was just terrible because they couldn't make something new and interesting. And I'll just go back to my original thought that protecting intellectual property is good for the economy. It's what drives the economies of many countries.
All right, I am going to wrap this up because I feel like we could talk forever. There's so much nuance and there's so many perspectives. And I think even as you come in as photo-driven people, what you think about and the way that you pull insight relates to so many different industries and disciplines. So I think that I want to continue this conversation with you guys. Is the plan to do another survey in a year and do another test?
Yeah, that absolutely. And again, it's a good reminder that if I had more time, we would do a few more pop-up, like what Rob did this
Yeah.
week, which was so fascinating, but actually maybe smaller scale surveys is where I'm going. Even just to look, are you positive? Are you negative about AI? What's your age? What's your level of? There's some interesting things that could be teased out just from quick pop-ups. So stay
Good.
tuned. No promises, but definitely the idea would be to launch again.
Amazing. I'm going to keep an eye on that too, because I think so much of this is the conversation and how it evolves and how it changes. And just all of us just getting together on the same page to just say, we care about this. We don't necessarily agree, but we all want the same thing as a thriving and successful industry.
I think that's all our goals, is to help people,
Yeah.
help them be successful and try and give them the tools they need to navigate what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. As was said earlier, it hasn't really been served, these particular people, in terms of trying to stem the tide of the erosion of rates, et cetera. So this AI is a huge one.
Thank you very much for doing your service. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Renate. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. It really helps The Grain grow, reaching more creatives across the globe and inviting them to join the conversation. To learn more about The Grain, head to thegrain.ai, and to reach me directly, please send an email to Ronit, that's RONIT, at thegrain.ai. Because we need to start talking about the pleasure and the peril of AI and the future of creativity. And we need to do it now.